Welcome to Just Minding My Business Media. I hope you are having an amazing day. And I am so excited today to bring Mr. Salazar to our platform to talk about his new book, Introducing the Emergent Strategy, a Revolutionary Approach to Business Success. I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell you all about who he is and what he's been doing and how this book will be able to impact your business. So, welcome, Mr. Salazar.
Thanks, Ida. Thank you very much for having me here. Let me just go over a little bit of my background. I'm a Colombian Latin American, worked in the US in the beginning of my career, got a PhD up there, and have worked all my life in strategy consulting. I will point out strategy, not strategic planning. My book will be a critique about strategic planning in general. I developed my career. I started working at very famous consultants in the US, and we were pioneers in getting some of the very cutting edge ideas of strategy into Latin America. And then I built my firm, and from the very beginning, I will probably talk about some of the original ideas that I was very lucky to be around when they came. I developed a consulting process that was very successful in helping firms win and grow, which is really the most fundamental, real objective of strategy. And over time, I mean, people would tell me, why don't you write something? And it took me like 25 years to actually do it, or get the time to do it. But I discovered that I had basically honed in some principles, more than methods, principles that I think are at the core of strategy. And so what I did was I wrote my theory. I also think that there was a lack of a theory. There are many methods, and I don't think there's a theory about how to practice strategy and so making sure that you end up with a strategy. And I wrote this book, with very humble intentions, just to have it around to train my consultants and to maybe just give it to my clients. And turn out that very soon it became a bestseller. It's actually been in my country, in Colombia, and in other Latin American countries, not only a bestseller but a long seller. And that, after the success of the book and the praise of the book by so many practitioners and people that I hadn't met, or type of companies that I had never even thought of, I decided to actually translate it. More than translate it, I actually rewrote it in English because it's very hard to. I had the tension of writing the book in English originally because the native language of strategy is English. So I wrote it in English again, same book, but the same ideas, but a little bit of a different book. It wasn't really a translation. And I mean, not very Latin Americans dare to write for a global audience, let alone the American audience. I did, and that's what I'm here doing. I'm making sure that my book is known and that people can get to understand it, and maybe that we unleash the same phenomenon that we've had in Latin America.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right in. So what let me just frame this because I'm excited. So why is traditional strategic planning failing? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Right. The first thing to know is that the governing paradigm of whatever strategy is strategic planning. People tend to confuse a strategy with strategic plans. People think that a strategy is a plan. There's a huge set of industries that prey and live off that. Consultants, technology providers. Culturally, companies have to have these rituals, constantly talking about their strategic plans. The plans typically, as you know, and everybody knows, fail. And when they fail, they change the plans. They don't question whether the plan is the problem, but they actually get another plan. They tend to fail in manifold ways, but the most fundamental is that they always say the plan was beautiful, but we couldn't implement it. Stuff like that is kind of a circularity, a tautology. I think simply because I think there's what's called some sort of availability law. I mean, people know in their hearts. I mean, many people tell me when I read your book, I knew that I was feeling the same thing that you were, denouncing, but nobody dared. And when you don't have an option, you use what's there. So out of custom,
Yes.
Obviously, the idea is very pervasive. I think the Americans that are, the hotbed of all these things, uh, created this huge leviathan of strategic planning. I think it started in the 50s when the GI Bill and the military people came from back to the US, and so they brought all these practices, those military planning, whatever practices, into corporate America, and it became entrenched. And obviously, the other interesting thing is that it has all these waves and trends that fit it. So every 10 years there's a new trend. Now it's AI. 10 years before was digital transformation, and before that it was mobility, and then it was whatever. And then at the beginning, I think it started in force in the 80s with total quality management. So it always, this is strategic plans are always dominated by the spirit of the era. And so people do that. They have all these embedded things. They have plans that they turn into budgets, that they turn into smaller plans. In large companies, they actually have offices for all these things. Even regulation forces them to have plans. For
Uh-huh.
example, in Latin America, in my country, there's a lot of, it's actually laws that mandate you to have strategic plans. So the whole thing is big. So the first thing is the thing exists, is big, is the governing paradigm, and it doesn't work. It
Mm,
doesn't work, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. So what I did was that, there had been some very fundamental philosophical criticisms
mhm,
that American scholars have made over time that had been left unanswered. The first one was Mintzberg, Henry Mintzberg, famous professor from McGill University, who said at the beginning of the 70s that planning couldn't lead to a strategy. The bad thing was that he proved that it couldn't, but he didn't show what could. He said, by doing plans and by planning, and he was actually a very playful guy, full of examples. By doing plans, you could never get to anything similar to or connected to what a strategy really is. He left it there. He was criticized, abandoned, and I think he was, he stayed there because no, he didn't provide an alternative. I mean, he talked about fallacies. He said strategic planning has fallacies, but people can't practice out of fallacies. So that was kind of the original critique. Planning can't lead to a strategy. Then in the 90s, the famous Harvard professor Mike Porter, after having worked in Japan, by the way, wrote this paper, which I never understood why he didn't turn into a book, called What is Strategy? And he reflected upon what really is a strategy and what isn't.
mm,
And what he said, which for me is, I think, today the second most downloaded paper in HBR, in Harvard Business Review, a seminal idea. He said, strategy is not what people think strategy is. Strategy is not about objectives. Strategy is not about trends. Strategy is not about projections. Strategy is not about programs or activities. Strategy is about choice. A
mm.
strategy, the result of a strategy is a set of hard choices. And that was a very compelling idea. I mean, that one is much more connected to me because I was working at Monitor, his firm, in the 90s when this paradigm was moved, was when this paradigm shift happened. And I thought everything was going to change. And what shocked me, over the next decades is that nothing really changed. I mean, after this huge idea, people continue practice their plans. They would intellectualize and talk about. They even talked about planning choices. I mean, some really contradictory thing. I mean, it's like planning to have a divorce 10 years down the road. I mean, you can't plan choice. You can't plan hard choices.
All right.
But he left it there. I think again, number one, he didn't write the book he should have, and number two, he wasn't really very interested in. Okay, if strategy is about hard choice, and I emphasize hard choice, then he didn't really do well or was very interested in how do organizations make hard choices? How could that phenomenon happen? So I left it there. After I saw those ideas, I was working back then at Monitor, my life changed. And I decided to take that idea into the market. Actually, before knowing Misber, I learned about Misber much later in my life. And I guess what I did was, at the end, a theory to connect those two things in the following way. My theory, what my theory says is, if a strategy is about hard choices are things, is basically, doing things in a very unique way and giving up on a lot of attractive things. That's why it's hard. It's like, for example, when Southwest Airlines decided to have only one type of aircraft, or when when there's a famous company in Colombia that is in the ice cream business and it doesn't have fridges. Really, fundamental choices in the market. I'll explain to you why the choice is important for strategy as a message. But if a strategy is about hard choices, how could organizations do that if that's already hard at a personal level? And so what I did was I discovered, what I discovered through my practice and I put together in a theory is the only way in which an organization can get to a hard choice, therefore practice strategy, is through a process of discovery and breakthrough that comes from within, comes from reflecting upon what you have been doing, what has happened in the market with what you have been doing, which is the contrarian process to what strategic planning proposes, which is that you reflect on what others are doing or what trends are bringing into the thing, and those type of things take away your initiative. So the principles of my strategy is what you do. What you do is conditioned by how you are organized, so your organization is a strategy too. It's not that organization executes strategy, it's that organization is your strategy. And finally, the organizations are organized according to a set of paradigms, beliefs that the organizations have about themselves, their markets, their clients, their competitors, that are in some sort of tinderbox. They're they're hidden from sight. And unless you break one of those paradigms, you cannot unleash any transformation, any strategy mutation. So I talk about it in a sense of a trinity. I mean, you don't have to be a Christian to practice the emergent strategy, but the concept is trinitarian in the sense that strategy is three things together or is nothing. It's what you do, it's how you're organized, and it's how you think. And those three things co-evolve and mutate together. So in a process, what we propose to our clients is start reflecting upon what you're doing. You will quickly discover things that are happening, result of what you're doing that you were not aware of. When you get exposed to those things, you won't like it. You enter a phase of dissonance. You will enter in denial. If you manage to overcome that denial, and you will actually enter a breakthrough, and like in science, like Thomas Kuhn, that breakthrough will topple, like in a domino effect, a lot of things that you believed in your old theory of the business. You will basically recreate your theory of the business. And with that's the real, I guess, pinnacle of the theory is only when that has happened are you ready to practice the hard choice. Otherwise, you're deceiving yourself. The down payment of the hard choice is the breakthrough. So that process. So this is not education or training. This is learning the hard way, discovery and learning via breakthroughs. So, for example, a client of ours, a couple of months ago, just discovered that the brand that was making more money consistently over the last decade was not part of their core brand. And they had to acknowledge that. They had to acknowledge that they had been investing in the wrong brands. They had to, get to that. They had to agonize over that. And once they overcame that, they were able to, transform their organizations from basic ways like, changing the managers, changing the budgets, and measuring different things. And that's the way. So we call that an emergent strategy cycle. So emergent, the strategy is the approach to a strategy should be emergent. It should emerge from the marketplace, which is the final judge, from what you're doing with it and the feedback you're getting from it, which tends to be typically cash flow. And the phenomenon emerges into your conscience. It's some sort of mindfulness. It's corporate mindfulness revisited. Obviously, nothing can emerge that didn't exist before. And so the process is that, that's what I did through 30 years with my clients, very successfully. The net result was companies discovered basically, that they were not competing effectively, that they were not creating or capturing value, which is the typical story behind that. And once they did that, they were able to make the hard choices, stuff, from, closing plans, changing brands, focusing certain activities at the expense of others, leaving some countries and entering others. That's kind of, so all those are the typical hard choices that I face every day that I know could not have been made under the reign, under the governing paradigm of strategic planning. I've never seen strategic plans or producing those type of effects unless they're in a huge crisis, and it's typically a little makeup of a fundamental downsizing.
Wow. I've never heard it explained that way. Strategy. Never, ever, ever. And there's so many definitions of strategy,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
this one is brand new to me.
I'm glad, and interestingly, I'm sure it will grow. It will grow on you as you see it, because what happens is that people know it. No, for example, my theory recognizes an observation that everybody has made is most successful businesses have nothing to do with the original idea or plan that unleashed them. Not only in Silicon Valley, all over the world.
True.
You need a theory to explain that phenomenon. You cannot just make it into an anecdote. You cannot say that happens and then let's do plans.
Yeah.
That's the phenomenon. By
Yes.
the way, my theory is it would be a unified theory for both established corporations and startups. Whereas in the paradigm of the strategic plan, you have strategic planning for big companies and then lean startups for small companies. And philosophers, and I myself consider at least an aficionado to philosophy. I mean, you would agree with me that if you need two theories for the same phenomenon, then you have no theory.
Wow. So how can people get the book?
The book is I mean, in the current world that we live in, what I did was that I made sure that it was fully available in Amazon.com, in the English version all over the world, for shipping all over the world. We're going to be available that way for a long time, I think, before we actually enter, physical bookstores. So it's there. The title of the book is the Emergent Strategy and the Death of the Strategic Plan.
Mm,
Sorry, and the Death of Strategic Planning. In Spanish, it was plan. So the Emergent Strategy and the Death of Strategic Planning is a paperback, easy to read. I think it's full of examples. In the American version, in the English version, we have a lot of American examples. In the Latin version, we have Latin American examples. And I think there may be something to the book that in countries where you don't have the levels of readership that you have in the U.S., let alone in this field.
mhm.
For example, my book is the best sold nonfiction book in Colombia.
Wow.
So it's there. Our website is www.theemergentstrategy.com.
Mhm.
That's where we have we post our newsletters, our concepts. We keep it, we constantly feed it with content. We have also an Instagram page, and probably the best one is my LinkedIn. Let me just give you
Okay, and
the
I'm gonna
Instagram.
try to add that to this interview because you have touched on some things that I'm sure a lot of people have not heard of
Yeah.
in terms of strategy. You have, I'm sure of it because I'm listening and I'm thinking to myself, um, some of it I have experienced, but didn't
Yes.
put a name to it.
Exactly.
Didn't know
I
what to
think
call
you're describing exactly the situation that most of my readers and clients tell me. I knew that, but I hadn't named it.
it. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We
So,
all knew it, Ida. We all knew it.
yes, but we didn't know what to call it because
Exactly.
the definition of strategy has never been given to us this way.
And interestingly, what I did then, once you understand the fundamental mechanism, what I did is, I mean, there's a nexus of methods. Every year there's a method. I said, I guess many philosophers. I think the last one saying that I think is Elon Musk himself, who says that follow principles, not methods. What I did was that I distilled the message of the emergent strategy in eight principles. Yeah,
Yes.
and every one of the chapters from chapter 3 to chapter 10 is one of the principles.
Oh, okay.
And you follow those principles and you practice them as you see fit.
Okay.
There's no step one or step two. I mean, all I suggest is that you start reflecting upon what you have been doing, which is what is most easily discarded in strategic planning. People remember, all unhappy companies are watching what successful companies are doing.
Mhm.
And the bad thing though is that, and I think that was one of the fundamental ideas of Mike Porter in 1996 that I referred to, is that he discovered and he proposed back then that strategy was about being unique, not better. And only unique companies, like in biology, only unique species dominate. I mean, if you have two species that are equal, one will kill the other one.
Mm.
So the same thing happens in the marketplace. So when you know that the purpose of a strategy is to deliver uniqueness, some sort of DNA in the market, then you know that the cost of uniqueness is choice. Because if you weren't built upon hard choices, you'd be easy to imitate and therefore not unique.
Yes.
So that's why the choice message is not capricious. Is not just because I want to victimize myself or you. It's simply because the cost of uniqueness is choice.
Mm. Wow.
So, and that's what makes the essence of strategy choice.
Yes. So, give us a couple of straight principles that you outline in the
Right.
book.
But I have I'd say the trinity I started off with are all principles. I mean, the first one is strategy is what you do. Start there, and if you want to finish, remember, if you want to implement, which is at the end what you want to do, if you want to provoke action, start with action. Strategy is what you do. Don't go and do benchmark analysis of your competitors. Don't waste your time there.
Mm.
Strategy is what you do. Then strategy comes from breakthrough. If there's not a fundamental breakthrough, we typically call it, the result was there, you hadn't seen it, you let it emerge, and when it emerges, it questions you, it
Mhm.
forces you through dissonance. If you don't shy away, you will eventually overcome the dissonance and have a new theory of your business. So strategy is breakthrough. That would be the second principle. The
Okay.
third one is that once you, like in science, when Einstein said, yes, I mean, the speed of light is a maximum and, time is relative. He said that, but that was not the end of history. That was the beginning of history. That was maybe the end of Newtonian physics, but the beginning of a whole new era. It wasn't that he ended up there and all went to sleep. The same happens when you break a paradigm. For example, when you discover that you confused your competitor, or that you didn't know what your core brand was, and that you were playing with yourself, having a business defending another one, all those things that it might come from anywhere. Once that breakthrough happens, unleashes a domino effect, what I call learning, quick, like in science, quick learning. When you have those fundamental scientific breakthrough, what happens is that in the next 10 years, a lot of others happen very quickly. So the same phenomenon happens in your theory of the business. So a strategy is learning. Then, no kidding, strategy is choice. And you remember, people will avoid choice, will go the extra effort to avoid choice. They will try to make pseudo choices. People will try to say, okay, I understand. Then my choice is to be efficient. You say, no, that's not a choice. Anything that doesn't have a contrary is a choice. A
Mm.
choice is when you tell me something attractive that you're going to leave off the table.
Mm.
Show me something you invested a lot that you're not going to invest anymore. Show me something that is fashionable that you don't think is coherent with your business. Those are the type of choices that no pain, no gain. You would probably know it very well in English. If there's no pain, no gain. And then the other thing is that strategy is, the other critical principle, all of them, all over. For example, that choice typically is, and this is central. Strategy is about value. I wrote my theory without talking about cost. Strategy is about value, and people don't understand what value is. And value is really what's fundamentally at play in markets.
Mhm.
Markets don't care about your cost. They only care about your value, and people don't understand what value is. And I propose a definition of what value is. You see, for example, that value is like the joke of the elephants. I think it was Nelson Mandela who made that joke that if one guy the blinds, the blind man that one has the trump, he says one thing. If has the other has the leg, says that it's a log. If one has the tail, says that it's a rope. Value. A lot of people talk about value and don't know what value is. Value is a phenomenon that happens in the market. Before you reach the market, all you have done is cost. And value is what's simultaneously relevant and distinct. If you're distinct but irrelevant, people won't call you. If you're relevant but equal, people will all call you and ask you for a discount.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so the center fold of strategy is value, and that's absolutely critical. Then the other fundamental principle, which happens a lot, I think happens a lot. It happens a lot more in Latin America, which is very sad, but I think happens all over the world. Is that strategy is about winning. You don't, a lot of people do plans, and when you see after they have spent 2 months or 3 months writing this plan, and they tell you that they will probably grow 5% in the next decade. I say, I mean, you did all these things to grow that. I mean, that's no growth. So people play to play; they don't play to win. Roger Martin, the famous strategy thinker, wrote a book about it. Playing to win. For example, we in Latin America, we love soccer, and my country just lost the final there to Argentina. And we always say that Argentinians, they tend to win. I mean, they don't play beautiful most of the time, but they win.
Mhm.
The Americans, in many ways, are more practical. But the message into translated to companies is you see a lot of companies doing things because other companies are doing them because they are fashioning, but you never see them really winning. Winning in strategy is growing profitably. If you don't grow at all or grow unprofitably, which is what 80% of the companies do all the time, you are not playing to win. You're playing for the sake of playing,
Mhm.
which is easy. I mean, a lot of people lose sight of that. And finally, strategy is about building capabilities. It's a little bit like the Achilles and the turtle. You go patiently building capabilities in the direction of your advantage. It's not about big sprints of testosterone, and change processes and change technologies, but the continuous build up of distinct capabilities in the direction of advantage. And finally, and probably the most brutal of them all, which is part of the Trinity is strategy, is organization. A lot of people think in the planning world that plans are like software and organizations are the hardware, and that you change the software and the organization will execute the plan. That's a very naive idea. It's like in biology, if you change the plan of a hummingbird for a dove, then the hummingbird will become a dove or vice versa. The
Mhm.
strategy is how you are organized. The strategy of a hummingbird is being a hummingbird. It's designed, is built upon the design of the animal. The same happens in companies. Your strategy is how you're organized. Don't deceive yourself. Don't think that you can, change plans and you change organizations. A very old sage of management, Peter Drucker, used to say that in a corollary. He would used to say, companies do what they're organized to do, not what the CEO wants.
Yes, true that.
So
That.
those are the values, those are the principles, and I mean, my big claim is that if you don't practice those principles concurrently and systematically throughout your exercise, then you're playing with yourself.
Yes. So I'm definitely going to have to get this book because I'm hearing things that no one else has really talked about. Just like you said in the beginning, they're not talking about this
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
They're giving you a whole different meaning of strategy.
exactly. And because I think, in spite of was something that people like Gary Hamel had said, there's a lack of a theory in strategy. There really wasn't a theory, and I'm positing a theory of what the phenomenon is, what should deliver, and how it should happen.
Yes. So you say and how do you work with your clients to help them to understand this and get this?
That's a very important question, Ida. I mean, yeah, and that was probably the most basic. When it happened to me, like with St. Paul, when I heard Porter's idea of what a strategy was and wasn't, my life changed forever. I mean, I couldn't go to practice the old ways. And what I started, bringing these ideas to my clients, which at the beginning they always still call them strategic plans. They would say, okay, we want to do that strategic plan that you're doing. I said, it's not a plan, but fine, thanks, and let's do it. And what we did was what we started, having these conversations. I think that, and people tell me that, people call us in our country, that we hold conversations. So we would recruit this set of people that I call in my book the critical coalition. It's not typically the CEO and his bodies or her bodies, but a critical coalition of people big enough to represent the collective intelligence of the organization. Because remember, in my theory, if something emerges, it's because it existed, and it existed in a collective intelligence. All organizations are collective intelligences. So it worked very well because I get this critical coalition, and we start having conversations not about what competitors are doing, but about what they have been doing and what's happening with what they have been doing. And you will be surprised and shocked as to how many things emerge out of that. We will basically help them see their numbers in a different way. We will never use the type of templates they use just to confirm what they know, but we use their data in a reframing friendly exercise. And the
Mm.
conversation starts, and it's very interesting because the other paradigm that falls, gets toppled in this idea is that the CEO is the strategist. What you really realize is that the organization is the strategist. The CEO is maybe the host or hostess of the process.
Mhm.
But then you have this conversation, which you did shocked about. I don't think there's ever been one case in which the critical coalition we recruit to have these conversations that lead to an emergent strategy have actually worked together. Yes, they work for the same company, but they had never sat through conversations with parity. Maybe they did report, and they certainly had met the CEO and stuff like that, but they had reported, they had committees, but they hadn't really had open conversations. And so the phenomenon, like in jazz, takes place there.
Mhm.
And you always see that, that once you recruit that intelligence, that is evident and obvious, that the company knows things that it didn't know it knew.
Mm.
And that's really the secret of it. I mean, it's not like we, went on a high and, connected with angels and so these things. It's not that type of trance. It's more like, aggregating individual perspective. Remember, it's very basic to observe that nobody has seen the same reality in any organization. Everyone has a perspective. So
Yes.
when you aggregate that, it's a very interesting, piece of and people always tell me in awe. They tell me how did we conclude this? I mean, how could we do these things? I say, and some even tell me and accuse me of, you knew this beforehand because you're some sort of magician, and you funneled us through the process. I said, no, I didn't know. By the way, how could I know if I had never even worked in your company or even in this industry to begin with?
Mhm.
So that is a very interesting phenomenon, and I am totally convinced that, and again, that's critical to explain, and in a further book I maybe go further into that. A collective intelligence is the strategist. Once the poor CEO gets off his or her back that responsibility of being the strategist, because in the typical strategic planning paradigm you have this genius that we're supposed to interpret and become the, and
Mhm.
that's really a bad model, and it hasn't really worked even at war. I mean, you have a lot of decentralized intelligence. So when you say, okay, no, a functional organization is alive because it has enough of a collective intelligence to cope with the complexity of the market. But interestingly, it has a lot of tacit knowledge. It doesn't know what it knows. Let's try to tap into that knowledge
Mhm.
to get what the market is telling us, and facilitate the next mutation. That's a fascinating process. My life, the other day, a guy was running an article on me, and he was telling me that I was the man of one idea, governed by one basic fundamental idea. And he brought a quote from Stefan Zweig, the Austrian novelist and philosopher, who said that, and that it just kind of followed upon me the conclusion. When you are governed by such a powerful idea, you forget about the price you pay to have that, to dedicate your life to one big idea. But it's so fascinating to see these collective intelligences emerge and these emergent strategies emerge out of that collective intelligence, that I am still, 30 years after the fact, totally devoted and invested in this. I'm actually not a writer. I mean, I wrote a book. I'm a consultant, and I still enjoy the process of consulting.
Yes, and I can feel it. You are definitely feeling what you're saying, and it's all over your face. It's just it's moving. Actually, it's very moving. Wow,
You're right.
this has been amazing. So again, how can we get this book?
Ida, thanks for asking again. You can get it in Amazon. In the paperback fashion, it's also in Kindle. You can download it in Kindle. The Emergent Strategy and the Death of Strategic Planning. That's very simple. And you can get my LinkedIn is Alejandro Salazar, Salazar. There I post and I keep a conversation with my readers and other people and clients. And we also have an Instagram page on the Emergent Strategy. And that was I guess the last one. Those are the three ways for us. We constantly post podcasts and videos and ideas around the whole theory. But again, I guess the main purpose for people to get to the basic ideas to read the book, The Emergent Strategy and the Death of Strategic Planning by Alejandro Salazar.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to get the book. I learned so much in this short period of time, and I want to thank you for definitely bringing my attention level way up. So I
I'm
can't.
glad, Aida. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your interest. I mean, thanks for reaching out and bringing a Latin American into your podcast. And I'm sure I mean that's not out of lack of humbleness. I'm sure that what happens to you has happened to a lot of people, and their lives in business will be transformed once they understand that a strategy is an emerging phenomenon, and then there's a basic set of 8 principles that you can use to unleash winning strategies, which winning and growing, which is about winning the marketplace and growing profitably.
Yes, it is. So thank you so, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Ida, and we'll be in touch. Thanks very
Absolutely,
much.
absolutely.